Obama turns blind eye to Gitmo horrors, says hunger strikes have turned closing the prison into a matter of life and death, lawyer argues. Barack Obama continues to ignore the Guantanamo Bay prison, even if its continued existence is literally a matter of life and death, says a lawyer. So the firm represents a number of detainees who are on a hunger strike within the prison. He says it depicts the horrific scenes of them being kept alive by guards who strap them into chairs and force feed them by shoving tubes through their noses, down their throats, and into their stomachs. He says ultimately Obama's failure to close Guantanamo is due to an absence of will, not an absence of authority. Says here, I'm tortured in a restraining chair, says one client to the lawyer. Says all my limbs are restrained and my clothes soaked from vomiting the formula mixed with water and laxatives. These men consider enduring such horrors their only option for a peaceful protest. Something else that's being ignored, Burma monks encouraging ethnic cleansing, says a report 125,000 Muslims have been displaced after a year's violence. Burma and its Buddhist monks have organized and encouraged ethnic cleansing in the country, asserts Human Rights Watch. So again, Human Rights Watch is, again, controlled opposition by these globalists. Also, you have some kind of sophisticated, again, these are like these proxy arms of the government, these independent think tanks and charitable organizations and the National Endowment for Democracy, George Soros funded stuff. That's what's doing this. So some 125,000 of the country's minority Muslims have been displaced, in which amounts to crimes against humanity. Iraq said to halt Al Jazeera's license and closes Jordanian border. Says we took a decision to suspend the license of some satellite channels that adopted language of encouraging violence and sectarianism. They also told Jordan that they will be closing the borders with Jordan tomorrow for 48 hours, citing domestic issues. Next up, it says here, Iraq's Sunnis gear up against the country's army. It says Sunnis in Iraq have announced the formation of military forces to counterattack the Iraqi army. The announcements come after the Sunni tribesmen were called to arm following a government-sponsored military raid on Sunni Muslim anti-government protests at the camp near Kirkuk. Iraqi army losing hold on north to Sunni and Kurdish forces as troops desert. Soldiers are deserting a beleaguered Iraqi army as it struggles to keep its hold on the northern half of Iraq in the face of escalating hostility from Sunni Arabs and Kurds who dominate the region. Then we have U.S. spy agency bribes Afghans, including Taliban, to buy influence over the nation. American CIA spy agency has been bribing Afghan officials and warlords, including the Taliban, in the past decade, with tens of millions of dollars in secret cash money and continuing efforts to win favors and maintain influence over internal affairs of Afghanistan. Taliban marks the start of monumental spring offensive with deadly attack. Said it didn't take long. Within hours of announcing the start of the annual spring offensive, Taliban in Afghanistan claimed responsibility for an early morning attack in the eastern part of the country that killed at least 3 police officers. Then we have this. Imran in Pakistan asked Taliban to stop killing people. Then a recent wave of terror attacks. He goes on and he says that I strongly condemn deadly attacks carried out by the Taliban. I'm also receiving life threats from terrorists, and that's why government has provided me the police escort. Armed forces deployed in 9 districts of Baluchistan. So this is like a shotgun wedding, a shotgun election. You will vote. So, there's a lot of propaganda and stuff, not saying the Taliban are great guys, but they're kind of resisting the imperialism, but at the same time, they're also being paid off to work with the U.S. Manage the drug trade. But they're talking about elections. Again, are they really going to get a real leader in Pakistan or in Afghanistan? They're just going to get puppets. So, again, it's like the same thing, just a shotgun election. Moving over to South America, in the wake of last year's soft coup against Paraguay's president, will a new narco-dictatorship emerge? It says Paraguay's April 21st election of Horacio Cartes, a dodgy tobacco magnate, rancher, and banker whose Banco Amabe has been accused of laundering drug money, tax evasion, and other crimes, raises a specter of state capture by powerful drug cartels linked to U.S. intelligence agencies. That's right, They had Lugo, who was like an ex-bishop or priest or something like that, and he was part of the Bolivarian Revolution along with Chavez and all that. So the current U.S. destabilization campaign targeting Venezuela's new elected president Maduro and the Bolivarian Revolution is instructive in this regard. As researchers revealed in Cocaine Death Squads and the War on Terror, Paraguay was the first country in Latin America to be publicly exposed for its involvement in the drug trade in the early 70s. Washington lawmakers quietly approved a bill to recriminalize some marijuana possession. Lawmakers in D.C. have passed a bill over the weekend that will recriminalize some marijuana possession, reacting to warnings from the state's crime lab that the current law could make it impossible to prosecute large quantity possession charges or large-scale marijuana growing operations. The scientists at the Washington State Patrol's Forensic Laboratory Services warned recently that the last November's election changed the definition of marijuana to such an extent that nearly all plants seized by police could be considered hemp. The trouble arises where the law draws the line between hemp and industrial fiber that contains no psychoactive drug. And it says here, the state's law currently says that if the tests show more than 0.3% of marijuana's delta THC, then it's a drug, but anything less is considered hemp and therefore not a drug. It says the bill awaiting the governor's signature adds all THC acids to the definition of marijuana, further separating it from industrial hemp. Again, and you go back to it, it says marijuana, unlike hemp, is still heavily restricted in Washington. But hemp is actually, I don't even think you can grow it in the United States, and it is still somewhat regulated. Yosemite's Smokey problem, Potheads, says drug busts are 4 times as high as next closest national park. So it goes on here and says the iconic symbol of nature where generations of tourists have hiked, snapped pictures, and camped and smoked a lot of weed. It says as NBC Bay Area reports, the drug busts at Yosemite are up 18% in the 6 years on the record books and 4 times as high as the next closest national park. 2,300 arrests between 2010 and 2012 compared to 500 at Yellowstone. It says we were comparing it to Disneyland, says one dad who smelled pot near his campsite. We see a lot more happy faces here in Yosemite than we did in Disneyland. The reasons behind the stats depend on who you ask, but it goes on here and says that with many tourists arriving with a little bit of a spring break mentality, a defense lawyer said the geographical concentration of most tourists lets rangers focus on a 7 square mile area, and a local says those rangers take it seriously. It's really not fair because they target you, he says. They know that people around here smoke pot. Just one more indicator that you can never really get away, right? You try to get away, and you can't. The madness continues. The more illegal immigrants that go on food stamps, the more money J.P. Morgan makes. So as you read, J.P. Morgan has made at least $560 million processing electronic benefits transfer cards. Each month, they make between 31 cents and $2.30 for every single person on food stamps. They have a vested interest in seeing poverty grow and the number of people on food stamps increase. It says, meanwhile, the Obama regime has been aggressively seeking to expand participation in the food stamp program. It's now come out that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has provided the Mexican government with literature that actively encourages illegal immigrants to enroll in food stamps. One flyer contains the following statement in Spanish: you need not divulge information regarding your immigration status in seeking this benefit for your child. 99.5% of legal immigrants get approval for legal status, says high number raises concerns about fraud. So the Obama regime has approved 99.5% of applications of those who have applied for legal status. So this is under Obama's non-deportation policy for young adults, granting legal status to more than 250,000 formerly illegal immigrants. And new Colorado law grants in-state tuition fees to immigration students. Sorry about that. The Colorado governor is expected to sign into law a measure allowing undocumented high school graduates to pay in-state tuition rates. Prior to that, undocumented students were being charged out-of-state tuition rates, which are 3 times higher than the costs faced by Colorado residents. According to a local affiliate, students looking to qualify for the reduced tuition under the Advancing Students for a Stronger Economy Tomorrow, or ASSET bill, are required to sign an affidavit stating that they have applied for U.S. resident status or that they will soon. You guys probably remember this article I've covered before. Antarctic sea ice sets another record past week with the most amount of ice ever recorded on the 256 days of the calendar year. This is from September of 2012. Then we have this from April 26th of this year. Climate scientists come to terms with the lack of global warming despite the heated rhetoric from the Obama regime and eco-terrorists about the urgency of global warming. Climate scientists or alarmists have begun to, usually they've been alarmists, they've finally begun to come to terms with the lack of evidence of catastrophic global warming over the last decade. Establishment media outlets have been reporting about the unexpected stabilizing global surface temperatures over the last decade, and even former NASA scientist and environmental activist, now he's definitely an alarmist, James Hansen, has recognized the decade-long law. So, something that's important to note, I've said before about this spraying of aerosols or chemtrailing, weather modification, geoengineering that they're calling for, that they've been doing for at least 20 years now, is that it's what they're doing is they're actually trying to warm it. They're creating warming, and for whatever reasons, there's all kinds of different applications for the chemtrailing, besides just creating rain or creating droughts or using it as a weather weapon. They can block radar, jam intercontinental missiles. They can, like basically the real high altitude satellite imagery. They can block that out as well. They can create a form of plasma in the atmosphere. Increase the effects of VLFs and satellite transmissions for mind control purposes. But what I kind of foresaw, like at least about 3 or 4 years ago, was that these people were going to spray like they've been doing, and they actually did create a nice warming effect. But they're trying to counter the cooling, the natural cooling cycle, whether it's an ice age that's coming or just a intermittent period of cooling. That they were going to spray to combat that, so they can keep their global warming lie going, so they can have a global carbon tax and carbon trading schemes to fund their global government. And so what we're seeing now is that what I'm seeing at least is that all this spraying is not keeping up with the cooling. That's why we're seeing cooling. They're still spraying just like they were. It's just that they can't fight the cooling that's happening. Like I've mentioned before, the main side effect of spraying is not actually to cool it and combat global warming, the geoengineering. They're actually causing the warming. That's part of the side effect of the Welsbach clouding seeding patent technology. So now, eventually they're going to say what? Oh, it was our spraying. The cooling came from the spraying. Yeah, that was us. See, we did it for you. We had to just take action to combat global warming. So the cooling came from us. See, we had to do it. We're justified. Record cold in every Canadian province and territory. Says every province and territory Canada saw at least one record low temp this morning. The 24th of this month, 3,318 cold records set this week in the United States. The media is definitely silent on this. So, what's also interesting is we've had record snowfall as well around the United States at one particular time, breaking records. There's Joe Bastardi on global temperatures saying that the fall is very, very plain to see. You'll see this trend continue. Says, I'm late this time around with meteorologist Joe Bastardi's Saturday's summary on 420. If you haven't seen it, then take a few minutes to do so. He has a short outlook for the coming years. He starts by showing the global temperatures for the last 4 years. You can see the fall that is occurring, and it's very plain to see. Says, of course, 4 years do not make a trend, but they do come after 11 years of stagnation. After 11 years of no warming, one would think that the warming would finally resume. Instead, just the opposite has occurred, and it's definitely been cooling amazingly fast, almost 0.4 degrees Celsius, thus completely defying the models. It says here that I've seen some outrageous statements that have been made lately, simply denying the facts that the previous 12, 13 years have been level. Now you see it falling off. It says this is because the Pacific decadal oscillation has flipped. Though there are much more important things facing our country today and facing the globe in general, the issue has really been blown out of proportion compared to the importance of other things. It says suddenly the reality of carbon investing is sinking in. Carbon is a U.S. $6 trillion bubble. According to Bloomberg, it says banks, funds, and institutional investors are seeking clarity from government and central banks about how greenhouse gas emissions may affect the value of their investments. Living in the United States raises risk of allergies. Well, we're heavily sprayed. Maybe that's why children born outside the U.S. have a lower risk of asthma, skin, and food allergies, and living in the United States for a decade or more raises the risk of allergies, says a study. So cute. Researchers watch nanoparticles that are being sprayed in the chemtrails self-assemble for the very first time. So, see, there you go. Like I talked about before, they can self-replicate. They can receive and transmit information. They can feed off you. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.